Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are jumping straight into what I can only describe as a true medical mystery. We're tracking down a highly unusual, incredibly resilient foodborne pathogen that basically breaks all the standard rules of food safety. Seriously, if you think the chill of your fridge is enough to keep your food safe, you might want to brace yourself for what we're about to uncover today. So picture this. What kind of bug actually looks at your refrigerator not as a freezing, hostile wasteland, but as a luxury resort? And, on top of that, imagine that same bug invading your body and completely tricking doctors by producing symptoms that look exactly like a totally different medical emergency. I know, it sounds like some sci-fi movie plot, but it's very real. And honestly, it might just be hanging out in your kitchen right now. All right, let's get into Section 1. Meet the microscopic suspect. Say hello to Yersinia enterocolitica. Now, as you probably know, being a gram-negative facultative anaerobe just means this bug is a hardcore, highly adaptable survivor that can thrive with or without oxygen. There are actually 11 recognized species in the Yersinia family. You've definitely heard of its infamous cousin, Yersinia pestis, the bacteria behind the bubonic plague. But while the plague is mostly history, enterocolitica is the main species actively invading our modern food supply today, causing an illness called yersiniosis. And here is its ultimate superpower. It is psychrotrophic. That means it doesn't just barely hang on in the cold, it actively multiplies. To put that into perspective, at just 10 degrees Celsius, this bacteria has a doubling time of only 5 hours. It can literally keep growing at 1 degree Celsius. You know how normal foodborne pathogens just kind of hit the pause button when you toss them in the fridge? Their growth slows to an absolute crawl, right? Well, Yersinia enterocolitica treats your chilling refrigerator like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It just keeps on multiplying, even as temps drop just below freezing, down to negative 1.3 degrees Celsius. It's wild. Moving on to Section 2, the symptoms of yersiniosis. So what happens when it gets into your system? It's kind of a waiting game, actually. The incubation period from when you eat the contaminated food to when you actually feel sick can range anywhere from 1 to 11 days. Once it hits, you're usually looking at an acute illness lasting 1 to 3 weeks. But here's the kicker. If complications pop up, things like arthritis or skin disorders, the aftershocks of this pathogen can stick around for several agonizing months. And here's where it gets genuinely terrifying. Its attack strategy literally changes depending on who it infects. Babies and young kids mostly deal with severe gastroenteritis and swollen lymph glands, but in older children and adults, it puts on a disguise. It can cause this intense intestinal pain in the lower right abdomen that is so severe it's constantly confused with appendicitis. Patients have literally undergone unnecessary appendix surgeries just because this bacteria is such a convincing mimic. Absolutely crazy. Okay, Section 3, hideouts, specifically pork and milk. So where is this stuff hiding before it reaches our plates? The bug is fairly widespread, but we do have a solid lineup of historical hideouts. We're talking raw milk, even pasteurized milk, bean sprouts, and tofu packed in spring water. Get this, back in 1976, an outbreak in the US caused 220 school kids to fall incredibly ill. The culprit? Contaminated chocolate milk. It just proves how everyday, seemingly innocent foods can be covert carriers for this thing. But, milk is just part of the story. As this famous medical quote highlights, pork is the missing link. Even though Yersinia is everywhere in nature, the pig is the only common food-producing animal that acts as a major reservoir for the specific strains that make humans sick. The bacteria largely hides out in the animal's oral cavity, specifically the throat and tonsils. So when pork is processed, if those areas aren't handled with extreme care, the bacteria just spreads right onto the meat. Which brings us to Section 4. The pathogen survival toolkit. Let's look at the hard numbers because it reveals a really interesting profile. Its optimal growth is right around room temperature, roughly 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, and it has an impressive tolerance for salt, surviving up to 5% concentrations. But it definitely has an Achilles heel. It's super sensitive to acidity. Dropping the pH below 4.6 stops it cold. And more importantly, it cannot survive high heat. Once temps cross 60 degrees Celsius, it's game over. But seriously, don't let those weaknesses fool you because its defense mechanisms are next level. Deep freezing? It survives it for extended periods. And if you think depriving it of oxygen will work, think again. Yersinia happily grows in vacuum-packed meats and modified atmosphere packaging. Yes, that is the exact kind of sealed environment you buy your chilled pork in at the supermarket. Plus, while it sits still in the cold, once it hits room temperature, it becomes motile, meaning it can literally swim around to spread. Finally, Section 5, defeating Yersinia in kitchens. Since we know refrigeration utterly fails as a defense, strict hygiene and heat are your only true safeguards. First off, you've got to treat raw pork as a high-risk hazard. Second, rigorously prevent cross-contamination. If you cut raw pork on a board, absolutely do not let your fresh veggies anywhere near it without a heavy-duty wash. And third, bring on the heat. Baking, boiling, or frying are absolutely essential here. And 60 degrees Celsius is the magic number. This is the exact thermal threshold needed to shatter Yersinia's defenses. If you reach an internal temperature of 60 degrees in your meats, you will easily inactivate up to 1 million cells of this pathogen per gram in just seconds. It is super sensitive to heat, so proper cooking is quite literally your ultimate weapon. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one final provocative thought. For Yersinia enterocolitica, your refrigerator is a luxury resort, not a prison. We've all been conditioned to think, hey, if it's in the fridge, it's perfectly safe. But knowing what you know now about this cold-blooded culprit, ask yourself, are you relying just a little too much on cold storage for your food safety? It's definitely something to chew on the next time you unpack your groceries. Thanks so much for joining me. Keep those kitchens safe, and I'll catch you next time.